Hello and welcome back to an episode of Generation Ochi. My name is American Ben, and today we're going deep into the world of Squid Game. Squid Game follows the story of a group of people who, laden with debt and other intractable troubles, are given the chance to compete for an enormous sum of money by participating in a series of children's games. Winning the competition presumably means overcoming the mess the participants have gotten themselves into in the outside world, but losing means dying. At the center of the story is Gi-hun, a deadbeat dad who can't seem to stay out of trouble or financially stable, and over the course of the show his inner journey charts an upward course as his outward one lands him in utmost peril. Squid Game is enormously popular. It has permeated the Western blogosphere, and it's always good to see K or J dramas find their way across the sea, but as you all know, its premise isn't exactly brand new. Nay, it's just another in a long line of what I'd term death arena shows to come out of East Asia. That said, Squid Game is very well executed. Its story and dialogue reflect some serious skill on the part of its creators, and the acting is absolutely superb. Though the English-speaking cast members who portray the VIPs are the show's Achilles heel. They are very not superb. Still, Squid Game is a solid entry in the genre, and it packs a punch in terms of its themes, which we are going to excavate today. Obviously, broadly speaking, Squid Game is about economic despair, as in, it speaks to the burdens that a capitalistic and materialistic modern society levels on its people. Now, I can just sense you rolling your eyes at that, as after all, such an idea has sort of been conveyed in art before. Many times, over and over and over again, actually. But hear me out, because Squid Game really has a lot more to say than just that, and to be entirely fair, its conclusions aren't egregiously simplistic. The first impression we're offered of Gi-hun is that he's a fairly sleazy guy. He takes advantage of his mother, abusing her financially, he gambles the funds he scrapes together away, and he doesn't even buy his daughter a decent birthday present, though, to be fair, I would have loved a gun lighter when I was 10 years old. Worst of all, he's got some pretty nasty characters on his tail looking to collect the money he owes them, and I don't think that they're going to do tickle torture as a form of punishment.
다음 달까지 못 갚으면 여기 신장 하나라 여기 안구 하나 대신 가져간다. Okay?
Our initial conclusion is that Gi-hun is a destructive person, a bad father, and someone who's going to end up in the death games because of his own scrofulous actions. And then through the course of the show, we find out that he actually isn't such a bad guy. The show very overtly makes this point to us. After winning 100k won from the death game representative in the train station, he acts selflessly with his prize money. He buys some food with the dough and uses it to feed a stray cat, and also gives a cut of it to his mom. A cut of the money, that is, not of the cat. Then Gi-hun even punches his ex-wife's husband, which, okay, normally wouldn't reflect good character, but he does so because the man tries to pay him off to stay away from his daughter. He could have taken the money, which he asked for with the intention of using it to pay for his ill mother's medical care, and run, but he didn't because he does care about his daughter and he has pride. We see his pride on display well before that too, during his meeting with the game representative in the train station. He meets the rep by the tracks, a character played by Gong Yoo of Train to Busan fame, and agrees to a game of Dakdi. I don't know if that's how to pronounce it, but that's the best I can do on short notice, with the terms being that every time Gi-hun wins a round, the rep will give him 100,000 won, and every time the rep wins, he gets 100k from Gi-hun, a rule that's quickly amended to allow for Gi-hun to absorb a slap to the face in lieu of paying up. After getting slapped repeatedly, Gi-hun starts to get mad, and when he finally wins, he doesn't instantly demand money. No, instead he goes to slap the game rep. It's almost as if, more than Gi-hun wants the cash, he's interested in preserving his pride. Perhaps then we can surmise that Gi-hun keeps getting himself into deeper financial holes as he tries to succeed, and because of his pride he can't admit he has a problem or that he doesn't know what to do. Thus, he keeps gambling and doing other skeevy things to get back on solid ground, and in doing so, falls further and further down the abyss. Gi-hun may be a deadbeat dad, but he doesn't exactly intend to be one. He cares about his daughter, and you'll recall, the show implies that what makes Gi-hun finally decide to join the game is the revelation that his daughter is moving to the United States, and that he won't be able to keep his ex-wife from taking her away from him if he doesn't have enough money to support her. Okay, so in a video purported to be about Squid Game's themes, why am I spending so much time breaking down its main character? Well, because I want you to see that the show tries to elicit sympathy for him. It doesn't want you to think he lands in the death games because he's wicked to the core. Rather, he exists within a system whose arbiters prey on the masses, all of whom have been thrust by birth into frenzied market madness. Gi-hun can't refuse the game rep's offer to play Dakji, not because he's a compulsive gambler at heart, but because he's in a dire economic situation and is desperate to get out of it. The game rep, who is essentially paid to act as an agent on behalf of society's elite class, preys on people like Gi-hun who need help and have no choice but to take risks. In other words, Squid Game's purpose is not to condemn its characters' moral values. Rather, the show is a condemnation of the system they belong to.
지금 이 자리에 계신 여러분들은 모두 감당할 수 없는 빚을 지고 삶의 벼랑 끝에 서 계신 분들입니다.
The one common factor among all participants in the game is that they're in debt and or need money to pay for some urgent cause. There is no universal moral quality inherent to the group. There are nefarious figures there right along with kindly ones. There are also participants there from all economic classes. Ali is a poor immigrant from Pakistan, and Sang-woo is a well-educated businessman. Yet both end up in the game because the system operates to get people at all levels of financial standing into trouble. Gi-hun's problem started when the executives at his former employer, a car company, pushed the business into financial ruin and then fired him and many of his fellow employees, letting the little guys take the blame for something they had no say in. The rich protect themselves from their own mistakes, and the working man gets hurt instead. And forced into financial struggle, risky behavior becomes an enticing option for the desperate. As horrible as the death games are, the show urges us to ask, is participating in them still the player's best option? Soon after the first game's completion, the contestants, having witnessed the price for losing, death, begged to be released from the competition and promised to pay off thetheir debts.
제발 살려주세요. 돈은 어떻게든 갚을게요. 제발 살려주세요. 저도 그만하고 싶어요. 제발 살려주세요.
They think that they're being punished for their financial malfeasance, but the truth, unbeknownst to the players, is that the game managers don't want them to pay off all their debts and be free of problems. No, they want them to have reason to bet, to play the game. In every show in the death arena genre, the audience always wonders what lesson the participants are supposed to learn. We make a naive, albeit optimistic, assumption that bad things are happening for good reason. No one ever suspects that the gods just suck, though there are no gods really in Squid Game. There is only the elite, sitting on top of the world, detached from the plight of the masses and their suffering.
What are you so worked up about?
I put a lot of money on that dickhead to win.
How much did you bet?
$1 million bucks?
Oh.
The VIPs and the game's hosts aren't interested in bettering the lives of the contestants or teaching them a lesson in financial responsibility. On the contrary, they're betting on the outcomes of the games. The pain and anguish of the players is their pleasure. The VIP's goal is to get a rush. They've dehumanized the masses and have no empathy for anyone. And when people like this arrange society, the institutions and leaders therein reflect their will.
이건 게임일 뿐입니다.
사람을 그렇게 죽여놓고 게임이라고요?
As in, they're big-time gamblers, and so they make everyone big-time gamblers. Here, when the players, racked with fear, complain to the game managers, one of the managers answers that it's just a game, a completely detached response considering the penalty for losing said game is dying. To the game masters, these people's deaths are insignificant. They're not even real. To the elite, little people are just playthings. The contestants do get out of the game the first time around, though. All it takes is a simple majority vote, and the game can end. Actually, funny enough, the game managers are very deliberate about preserving the democratic process.
지금부터 민주적인 투표 절차를 방해하는 어떠한 행위도 용납하지 않겠습니다. 그럼 다시 투표를 재개하겠습니다.
And yet the option to leave only triumphs by a single vote, and not even the vote of a real player, but the host himself. I think this speaks to the precedent that money or capitalistic endeavors take over the structure of government itself. The former subverts the proper functioning of the latter, according to the show. Since the participants are desperate to escape their debts, many of them vote against their best interest. And in this way, the elites who own the money can tyrannize a democracy. Then again, perhaps being in the game is in the player's best interests. The characters leave the game and return to all sorts of problems. Sang-woo is reminded of his debts. Se-byuk still needs to find a way to rescue her mother from North Korea. Gi-hun has his mother's medical situation, and Ali's boss won't pay him his wages. Sang-woo becomes depressed and suicidal. That's as low as a person can get, but he doesn't kill himself because he has a better option. Excuse me, he has a slightly less bad option: the death games. All of the players have this option, which, while not an entirely positive one, provide an alternative to the abominable state of their everyday lives. The vast majority of the players return to the game. The same system, presided over by greedy elites that got the contestants in trouble in the first place, is now here to save the day, but really force these desperate people into more trouble. Of course, in order for the game to suck players in, it has to make them believe it's their best option. And the way it does this is by making people believe that they can win. At the end of the show, game host Il-nam tells Gi-hun that he and his fellow contestants joined the games of their own volition. This is only partly true though. At best, it's a disingenuous statement. You'll recall after the players voted to end the game the first time around, Il-nam just randomly ran into Gi-hun outside of a store. In reality, he probably came to manipulate Gi-hun into returning to the game. Il-nam takes two different angles of persuasion to try and convince Gi-hun to come back.
나 다시 가기로 했어.
거기를요?
혹시 알아? 거기서 내가 1등을지.
First, using some reverse psychology here, he is attempting to make Gi-hun believe he can win too, and Gi-hun wouldn't want someone else to get the money if that prize could feasibly be his. That's what malevolent moneylenders do in a market society that lets them thrive. They convince people that by taking risks, they can win. And so they get these poor people wrapped up in debt and owing the man for the rest of their lives.
여기가 더 지옥이야.
The second angle Il-nam takes is to try and convince Gi-hun that life outside the game is worse than life inside it. This is also what the agents of the financial sector do to the masses, especially the middle class. They try to convince them to take risks because the current state of their lives is terrible, and thus gambling can be their saving grace. The masses divest their freedoms in the way of accumulating debt in order to attain a better life. And then, when things go awry, what do these agents of the system do? They blame the player.
여러분께서는 그런 저희를 믿고 모두 자발적으로 어떤 강압도 없이 이 게임에 자원하셨습니다.
Just as we see Il-nam tell Gi-hun at the end of the show, one of the game managers points out that the players have chosen to be there. This may be true, but desperate people can easily be taken advantage of and tricked into digging themselves into deeper holes. Holes which only get deeper as highfalutin hucksters sit sanguine upon the mound of rewards reaped from the folly of those falling. So the system incentivizes risk by making winning a high-stakes game seem probable, and in doing so, bolsters its elite at the expense of everyone else. Well, maybe not everyone else. I mean, the death games do produce a winner sometimes, and that person gets really rich, but that only one person makes it out of the competition with rewards shows just how low the probability of winning is. As a matter of fact, it's important to note that there is a bit of a zero-sum game dynamic to the competition in that players make more money by taking it away from others.
참가자 한 명당 걸려있는 상금 액수 1억, 따라서 255억의 상금이 돼지 점통에 적립되었습니다.
In the view of the show, this is a vital characteristic of unrestrained capitalistic societies. People are pit against each other. They have to destroy their competition in order to win. You'll observe that in the red light, green light game, the best way to win is to hide behind someone else. Letting other people take the fall so you can succeed sounds a lot like what Gi-hun complains his former employer did to him. By the way, think of the poignant commentary on the state of South Korean society that Ali catching Gi-hun as he falls is. A poor immigrant laborer is holding up a South Korean and preventing him from falling, and yet he is completely neglected by the people around him. But I digress. An even better representation of the dog-eat-dog world that money-hungry market societies have built is the tug-of-war game in which some people have to die, and one team has to kill another. Most of the players don't want to fight. They don't want to hurt people, let alone kill others, but the game forces them to do so in order to survive. We might extend this to the outside world and say that people don't want to take from their neighbors, but at times the high cost of life in modern society pressures people to be vicious. And so now some of you are probably saying, well, American Ben, not everyone chooses to hurt others. Not everyone makes irresponsible financial decisions. Not everyone is morally corrupt. Well, speaking to morality, the death games account for just about the entire range of people in society, the good-hearted to the completely depraved. There's all types of people in there, from the religious to the timid to the bold. Fine, not everyone gets into financial trouble, but statistically speaking, a lot of people have debt, and it's probably fair to say that the people in the competition represent a pretty fair sample of the general population of adults when it comes to economic status. The system doesn't make the process of supporting oneself an easy affair, so the question becomes, do the players really have a choice? Well, perhaps answering that requires a complex foray into free will, something I'm not really looking to do in this video. However, I think philosophically speaking, it's at least worth thinking about the malicious actions of some of the players in a different light. That is, we can see them as somewhat justified, and this speaks to a debate that runs in the subtext of the show throughout its story, one that it doesn't really solve. Is it better to be selfish or selfless in the heat of the game? This debate is most prominently highlighted in the relationship between Gi-hun and his friend Sang-woo. Throughout the show, Sang-woo is mostly selfish, making choices that harm others so that he can enhance his own chances of surviving and winning. In the Sugar Honeycombs game, he purposely tries to get Gi-hun to pick a different shape than him. When recruiting team members for the tug-of-war game, he turns down a man who wants to bring his wife along. He tricks Ali during the marbles game, and kills Se-byuk with his own hands. Other than that though, great guy. On the other side of things, during the course of the games and life outside of it, Gi-hun is mostly a benevolent actor. He pulls Se-byuk into his team for her safety. During the tug-of-war game, he lets Ji-young stay on his team when Sang-woo wants her out because she's not a man. He chooses to team up with the old man Il-nam during the marbles game because he feels bad for him, and he scolds Sang-woo for needlessly killing a man during the glass stepping stones game. Now, this is not to say that Gi-hun is the epitome of good and Sang-woo the face of evil. Both men do a mix of good deeds and bad, and neither's character reflects extreme polarization on the spectrum of morality. Outside of the game, Sang-woo helps Ali with his bus fare, the man he later kills. And prior to the start of the Sugar Honeycombs game, it does seem like Sang-woo's conscience is weighing on him after he fails to tell Gi-hun that he knows some details about the game they're about to play. On the other hand, Gi-hun refuses to help a man begging for his assistance during the red light green light game. So what's going on here? Well, both men eventually make conscious decisions about what is right and wrong. We hear this decision out loud when Sang-woo explains to Gi-hun why he killed the man on the glass bridge. Sang-woo sees a zero-sum answer as being an inevitable outcome of the game, and believes that if he doesn't kill the other players, he's going to get killed, and they're going to get the money he could have won. This is what the game is. This is why people turn on each other within the system and don't trust each other, because everyone is their competition in the market. Yet, can you really blame Sang-woo? Over and over again in the game, bad behavior is rewarded. Sure, Gi-hun lectures Sang-woo after he kills the man on the glass bridge, and ultimately his humane sentiments win our favor, but Sang-woo does survive the game. He also survives the marbles game by screwing over Ali. And the sociopathic gangster Duck-soo, he goes a long way simply due to his willingness to harm whoever he needs to in order to win. It's fair to say Duck-soo ultimately dies because he makes too many enemies, thus his bad behavior screws him over, but had he not done such things, he might have bit the dust much earlier. Would Gi-hun have lasted until the end of the game had he helped the man hanging on his leg in the first game? Gi-hun himself senses that he has to be selfish and even cheat, as we see him do during the marbles game, in order to survive. Now, we can just take all of this information and conclude that all of these people are just unscrupulous deviants. But really think about this. What would you do if you were in the marbles game? Is what Sang-woo does to Ali really that crazy, given the stakes are life and death? You don't come back from death, FYI, so if the choice is you or the really nice friend you just made, don't be so sure your survival instincts wouldn't kick in and allow you to do the unimaginable. Survival instincts explain the nefarious actions and violent behavior of a lot of the characters we come to know and love. Ali ends up grievously injuring his shady cheapskate of a boss when the two men have a tussle over wages owed. He doesn't mean to, and I don't think we can call him malicious, and yet the only thing that would be different if he had purposely pushed his boss into the machine would be intent. The world produces the same outcome either way. Ali may not be a violent person, but the system forces his hand, backs him into committing a violent act. In Se-byuk's case, she has to deal with some sordid individuals in order to rescue her mother from North Korea. If more opportunity and money were readily available to her, she would never meet the skeevy men she does. Instead, she's forced to become violent in order to deal with dangerous people, a dynamic which pits her nature against her desperation and turns her into a cynical person. Or what about Han Min-yo? She may seem dissolute and manipulative, but isn't she just using what tools she has available to her in order to survive? Nobody in the show can proceed through life completely washed of sin, because society at large is stained and dysfunctional. Thus, Sang-woo may commit the most reprehensible acts of violence in the show, but he's not alone in taking action that results in others being harmed. Everyone is guilty of this to some degree, because one person's loss is another's gain, both in the game and across society. However, by the end of the show, Sang-woo and Gi-hun become almost complete foils of each other. Gi-hun takes an interest in saving the people who mean the most to him and relinquishes his desire for coin, and Sang-woo loses himself in greed and kills Se-byuk.
그래서 죽인 거야. 형이 그런 인간이라서. 그 애 살리겠다고 다 포기할 수도 있는 인간이라서.
He murders her not to save himself, but to make sure Gi-hun can't end the game. He has embraced the system where Gi-hun has rejected it. Sang-woo wants the money, a prize which he has deluded himself into believing is equivalent with survival, which to some degree it may be, but overall is another common ailment endemic to a society that bows before the almighty dollar. The idea that greed is good. Itself a question worth debating, to be fair, albeit another day. So let's review a bit, shall we? To compete in society, you must enter into an arena full of killers, and the system will make you believe that it's both your fault that you're there and your fault for all the bad things that happen to you and all of the horrible things you do while playing the game.
내가 그들의 희생과 주님의 선택에 감사하며 기도를 올리는 것이다.
지랄. 지 손으로 죽여놓고.
And we're left to wonder who or what to blame. The mass of people for doing unholy things to beat out others in the market, or the system itself for backing all save for an elite few into a corner from which they can only emerge with weapons at the ready. However, there's another quality to the game that we're supposed to believe differentiates it from the outside world, that is, equality.
참가자들 모두가 같은 조건에서 공평하게 경쟁하지. 바깥 세상에서 불평등과 차별에 시달려온 사람들에게 평등하게 싸워서 이길 수 있는 마지막 기회를 주는 거야.
Frontman seems determined to maintain equality among all of the participants in the game. After all, while the contestants come from all walks of life and stations high and low, everyone sleeps in the same open room, competes under the same rules, and vies for the same reward. The world of the game is encompassed in a truly egalitarian society. Except for one problem. It's not. Actually, very little is equal within the confines of the game because it operates under a tyrannical dictatorship. The frontman reclines in luxurious quarters while observing the bloodshed from afar in peaceful and carefree solitude. Okay, maybe this is not necessarily indicative of inequality in itself, but we do actually witness the frontman living according to a different set of rules than everybody else. For instance, he shoots one of his soldiers for taking off his mask, but later when he takes off his mask to talk to his brother, he faces no punitive consequences. This is not an example of equal rights and treatment. How about the blind decisions the players are forced to make prior to the start of some of the games? During the Sugar Honeycombs game, it isn't really fair that some players get easy shapes to cut out and others difficult ones. Sure, they all have to make the decision with equal information, but it seems like the game would be more egalitarian if everyone was given the same shape. Or during the Glass Stepping Stones game, it's not really fair that the players who select low numbers on the mannequins have to test the bridge first. A more fair setup would be to have everyone attempt to cross the bridge without any broken tiles and without being able to see others go before them. The rules of these games, and I'll probably do a separate video on the games themselves, make the competition sound like it suffers from the same type of inequality that's present in the outside world. That is, some people start out much more disadvantaged than others. Additionally, the game's tyrant behaves like a tyrant, or perhaps we should just say an elite, and manipulates the game when it behooves him to do so. He shuts off the lights on the glass bridge when one of the contestants develops a method for determining which glass tiles are tempered and which aren't. I suppose the frontman's excuse for doing so would be market volatility. Some of you will get that. Sorry, just a short joke I wanted to share. No, seriously, look up GameStop if you want to figure that joke out. Now, there's an obvious analogy to make here. The society of the game appears to have characteristics of communism. The game's arbiters claim to want to create an egalitarian society within the game, and enforcing the rules that will supposedly make it so, a despot rises, while the masses descend into equal, abject suffering. Here's the better point about the game, though. It's not actually an escape from the system its people hail from at all. The players are in this same situation as they were in the outside world. The promise of riches entices them into risky behavior, and the powerful people making such promises use the players' debt as leverage to keep them gambling. When Gi-hun goes to visit Il-nam a year after his victory in the game, the old man asks him to play another game.
자정까지 저 사람이 그대로 있으면 내가 누군가 저 사람을 도와주면 자네가 이기는 거야.
He wants to bet on whether someone will help a homeless man on the street below before the clock strikes midnight, and he wants Gi-hun to wager something.
당신이 지면 내 손으로 당신을 죽일 거야.
자네는 뭘 걸 텐가?
뭐든지.
At this point in the show, the death games are far removed, and yet far from the arena of peril, Il-nam still tries to force Gi-hun into making a bet and risking something of value. Il-nam says he was a moneylender in the working world, and he may very well have spent his career preying on naive clients looking to double their dough. But why this final meeting now? Well, perhaps Il-nam is less malevolent than we think. Maybe he is looking to teach some grand lesson to Gi-hun after all. We'll find out next season. I mean, he does let Gi-hun live during the marbles game, handing him his final marble along with a slight scolding for attempting to trick him.
그럼 자네가 날 속이고 내 굿을 가져간 건 말이 되고?
It's as if he's trying to better Gi-hun here. And then, during their final meeting, Il-nam almost seems to have some sort of moral agenda to impart upon Gi-hun.
저대로 놔두면 금방 얼어 죽을 텐데 아무도 도와주는 사람이 없어. 가던 길 멈추고.
Il-nam goes on to explain that he was once as poor as the homeless man. He really seems to be trying to make a point about the world in this conversation. And you'll recall he also asks Gi-hun about his trust in people, specifically if any trust remains.
아직도 사람을 믿나 그 일을 겪고도.
So yes, it's possible that Il-nam intends to use his death games to change the world for the better, or perhaps he has something else in store for Gi-hun. I suppose we'll find out for sure if there's another season of the show. However, for now, what I have to conclude is that the only reason he wants to know if Gi-hun has lost his trust in people is because he wants him to have lost his trust in people. Il-nam spends his life deeply involved in the world of money, and for it becomes very cynical. After all, look at his experiences. Even Gi-hun tries to trick him. However, Gi-hun doesn't lose his trust in people because what the rich Il-nam who can insulate himself with money doesn't understand is that the desperate have to trust others or they won't survive.
원래 사람은 믿을만 해서 믿는 게 아니야. 안 그러면 기댈 데가 없으니까 믿는 거지.
Most people trying to survive in a cutthroat, competitive, materialistic society need help to get by, and so they have to trust someone. And why does Il-nam let Gi-hun live? Well, it's just as he says.
재밌었거든. 자네랑 같이 노는 게.
The reason is, he was having fun. The rich and powerful people who run the financial sector and manipulate the market can afford to view their manipulation of the economy as a bit of a game because they're sitting pretty. As a matter of fact, the reason that Il-nam created the game in the first place is because of boredom. He and his top clients were all rich and struggling to find a way to add some fun to their cushy but dull lives, and they did so by torturing those of lesser fortune by leveraging debt against them.
돈이 너무 많으면은 아무리 뭘 사고 먹고 마셔도 결국 다 시시해져 버려.
And this is where the games come into play, and more specifically, childhood games. Il-nam is a cynical guy who feels deprived of joy, and he's not alone in that feeling. Modern, secular, materialistic, capitalistic societies are rife with cynicism. However, we can transcend the inanity of the capitalist critique here and instead infer some commentary about the world in general.
보는 것이 하는 것보다 더 재미있을 수가 없지.
The longing for childhood is a supremely prevalent theme in Squid Game. Il-nam has become disillusioned with the adult world. He does bad, but his bad self has been cultivated within a bad environment. Thus, though he himself is a malicious actor who advances the brutal state of the system that turns people bitter in the first place, he longs to escape the cold world he has helped create. And so part of the fun he is looking to revisit with the death games is the fun of childhood. Il-nam isn't the only one to long for his youthful days either.
상우야 기억나냐? 우리 초등학교 교실에 조개탄 난로 있었잖아. 도시락 그 위에 깔아놓으면 엄청 뜨거워져가지고 막 누룽지 생기고. 응?
Childhood is a time when things are easy, simple. Kids have few worries of note, no personal debts, and don't think about serious issues. Children just have fun, carefree, uninhibited fun. And to some extent, everyone, the rich man and the poor, the game master and the game player, the money lender and the lendee, all ache for that time of yore when all of the world's darkness was hidden to them.
어릴 때 형이랑 이러고 놀다 보면 꼭 엄마가 밥 먹으라고 불렀는데 이제는 아무도 안 부른대.
Adults try not to show it, but they're just big, scared, confused kids who can use someone to watch over and care for them, feed them. Instead, the process of being burst from their halcyon childhood bubbles into the mad, bad marketplace creates fear, then distrust, then violence. In childhood, Squid Game is only a silly game. In adulthood, when it's extrapolated to the real world, despite all of its weird rules, after its first few steps, it basically devolves into a fight to the death. And that's how I think the show basically views the fundamental character of modern society as constructed by bored elites. So, despite all its bells and whistles, it's just a fight to the death. So then what are we left with here? Just a depressing, somewhat nihilist conclusion about the world? Bad behavior is rewarded and nothing in life is fair? The rich and powerful want to see the masses destroy each other for their pleasure and profit? Well, I wouldn't say that. There is a toll that the inhumanity of the world takes on one's being, as in on the mind, the body, and the soul. When it comes to the body, few people are aware enough to notice the punishment their physical being takes in the market's rat race. At the start of the game, the players are not told that the penalty for losing is dying. They think that they can just win a bunch of money and do not foresee what they will be wagering, their very health. Think back to Gi-hun's first meeting with the game rep in the train station. He thinks he's run into a pretty good deal. He can win money and only has to pay up by taking slaps to his face. If he can't pay what he owes with money, he can pay for it with his body. But the slaps add up, and over time, they'll drive you mad or kill you. Then there's the toll the savagery of society takes on the mind. When one gives in to the ways of the world and behaves badly, he may reap rewards in the short term. But unless he's a complete psychopath, his sin will eat away at him, as it does for Sang-woo, who, when he finally recognizes the error of his ways, is too lost in despair to go on.
미안해.
And both the toll on the mind and the body poisons the soul itself, and what emerges is bitterness and cynicism. Gi-hun finally reaches this point at the end of the show, but then he overcomes it with just a little miracle to provide the fuel for hope. A small act of kindness rekindles his flickering soul, which is maintained through the duration of the game, albeit barely, through his humane actions which garner him viable connections with other good people. This, like the toll on the body, is not an easily foreseeable reward, because it's not direct profit gained from an investment, and humans are terrible at making indirect investments. The world tries to make Gi-hun bitter and despondent, but he breaks through and blossoms. He dyes his hair red in rejection of societal and system norms. He takes care of Sae-byuk's little brother, reconnects with his daughter, and most importantly, fights to stop others from getting lost in the game. Anyways, that's my take on Squid Game. It's not a demonization of everybody. It's not a demonization of society. It's more of a commentary on where we've gone wrong in our modern, capitalistic, materialistic societies. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give it a big thumbs up. Definitely comment down below. I want to hear what you think. Remember to subscribe to this channel. Oh, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a damn thing. For now, my name is American Ben, and I'll catch you next time. Generation Ochi, peace.